Good evening, everyone. Welcome you again on behalf of the team Calcutta Comparatists 1990. And I take this privilege to warmly welcome you again in the 85th lecture of the lecture series on this platform. As you know, Calcutta Comparatists is organizing online lectures for last 10 months, and we are independent forum for research scholar of humanities and social sciences. And this whole idea we took inspiration from the history of 1919. During that period, Ashutosh Mukherjee, former vice chancellor of Calcutta University, introduced the study of research in modern Indian languages, and it was like sort of looking back to the history of and studying different languages in one platform. So we take inspiration from this idea, and we are sort of trying to organizing lectures on the different topics, and which is like delivered by academician and distinguished research scholars of different fields. So I won't take much time, and now I would request our member Purvasha Mondol to formally introduce Professor Khal Torabully, who is our esteemed speaker of the day, and he will talk about the Coolitude and the new methodology of the labor. So over to you, Purvasha. You may introduce Professor.
In today's
Thank
session,
you.
we will listen to Khal Torabully, who is a writer, poet, and semiologist. Dr. Torabully is the author of 25 books in French, English, and Creole. He studied at Université Lumière of Lyon, France. Dr. Torabully is regarded as the pioneer of indenture studies, articulating history, the archives, anthropology, and deconstructing discourses in the realm of the coolie trade. He worked on the emergence of a methodology enabling to fill a gap in postmodern and postcolonial studies through the paradigm of coolitude. He developed the Kalapani aesthetics, contradicting the view of the ocean as a space of ontological loss. He devised the first theoretical frame of memorial negotiations between slavery and indenture. He is the honorary patron of the Amina Ghafoor Institute of Indenture, UK, and the initiator of the International Indenture Labor Route UNESCO in 2014. The title of his talk today is Inclusive Indenture, the Methodology of Coolitude. It's my great pleasure to welcome you here. Now you may start your lecture. The virtual floor is yours. Over to you, sir.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for this presentation. And let me tell you, I'm very, very happy to be invited to this group, which I believe is an initiative of researchers and students from Calcutta University. And it is a group of comparatists like this pursuit of, comparative literature, because as I was telling Ratrika Ganguly before, I hold an MA in comparative literature from Université Lumière in Lyon, France, besides my further studies in general linguistics and semiotics. Just allow me to introduce myself very rapidly, because I believe we write from a location. And in fact, my location is between locations, because I was born in Mauritius, which is incidentally the crossroads of indenture, worldwide indenture, global indenture. I was a few steps from the Apravasi Ghat, which is now a World Heritage Site. I did not know at the time when I was a boy that this was going to be a World Heritage Site, when I was 6, 7 years old. And I was born in Mauritius from a mother whose family came from Calcutta. So you see, there's part of my memory in Calcutta, and I hope I'll be coming here one day. I've never been to this part of India,
Glad
and
to have you.
I would love to meet you, the university, and and go to this river where a lot of indentured persons boarded, the Hooghly, to go to diverse colonies at the time. My father came from Trinidad and Tobago. His family was indentured there. So you see, I am between the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean, which gives an idea that I had to write in a trans-archipelagic, trans-oceanic way. I am the son of a sailor who became a printer as well. So you see, my life is between so many things. And when I was in Mauritius, I I could hear um at least 10 languages. So we had our formal education in English and French, basically. We also studied some other, what we call the Oriental languages like Hindi, Bhojpuri, Urdu, Tamil, Hakka, Cantonese. And, well, Mauritius is like a United Nations in miniature, you see. So, and it's very small perimeter. I started writing in English, and then I stopped because I went to France for studies, and then I started writing in French. And so most of my writing has been carried out in French, but I kept in touch with English and Creole. I wrote 2 books in English. The Anthology of Coolitude at Anthem University Press in 2002, and another book which was printed at the Apravasigat, which is Voices from the Apravasigat. It was in English. And then we just had this last anthology of Coolitude as a Kindle publication. It's a numeric version of the anthology. We wanted to address the challenge of the pandemic and circulate ideas. And I know this is giving a lot of ideas to other people. And so I was talking to Ratrika Ganguly before. Now they are selling this book at about, let's say, $10. I will keep in touch with her and with the group so that you can access the book for $2 or $3, which will make this more accessible. The most important thing for us is to help young people to get access to elements at the lower schools, because I know it's a very difficult time for everybody in this pandemic, and especially the younger generation, the students and the researchers. And I know how difficult it is in France for the students. So we dedicate to help, and I admire all the energy you have in this group to organize things, to get going. And this is very inspiring for us, very heartening. Thank you very much. So I will just go back to the title of my talk, Inclusive Indenture, the Methodology of Coolitude. Well, I don't want to define again what is inclusiveness. You know this better than I. But I'll give it a twist of my own practice of writing, what inclusiveness means in indenture. And this term is gaining traction now, but I started it in 1989 when I wrote Khal Coolitude, which has been translated by Nancy Carlson very deftly and published by a publisher from Calcutta. You see how the connection with Calcutta is fantastic. Seagull University Press, Seagull Press, which also prints the book in Chicago in the United States. So this book, Cargo Hole of Stars, is the foundational book of Coolitude and of indenture studies, because it is a poetological writing that is a kind of mix between poetry and knowledge and the silence of the archives. Um, so you see, this writing came in 1989 because I was wondering, being a young Mauritian schoolboy, um, I did not learn much about my Mauritian history. Mauritius was a British colony until 1968, and I knew more about British history and European history until my advanced level, higher school certificate. Uh, I knew more about the French Revolution than about indenture. I did not know a word. I did not know the existence of the word indenture. And Mauritius was the world center for indenture, which is extraordinary. So this is how I addressed the issue of writing about indenture. So I wanted it to be inclusive as from 1989 because I do not want to enter in a competition between other servitudes and indentureship. This is very important to understand, because normally when you write a foundational book about the history of the voiceless, these indentured persons, also known as coolies, they were voiceless at that time. There was absolutely nothing, maybe one or two books written in Mauritius by Kisun Singh Hazari Singh, but reserved for the elite. As a young man, I did not know anything about it. So I said, let us connect with other servitudes. This term I will use frequently because indentureship is not the only form of bonded or semi-bonded servitude through a contract that has existed in the history, the wider, broader history of mankind. When I write, I always try to relate to the broader history, both chronologically and both diachronically, because I want to address larger, wider humanity. So I shared very readily with slavery. If when you read, I know Ratrika, you're reading the book right now, you will see I reference the slave in this foundational book because I do not want to engage in a competition who suffered most in the past. I mean, this is very sterile approach of the past, and we have to grow together because this 18th century and before has been a very difficult, century. The empire had its own norms of humanity and its own definition of subjecthood. You see, so I wanted my discourse to be inscribed in the global South, addressing my own reality in the poetics of my location. Where does this voice come from? Why do I have to address a part of what is said in my own history? You see, this is the basic idea. And then gradually I found the structure of the book. I mean, it's very important to understand because it all comes from the cargo hold of stars. So I wrote about the book of crossbreeding. The book is a trilogy, 3 parts. Book of crossbreeding, the book of the sea, which is a book of the voyage, and the book of departure. So, but the book can be read in both ways around, you see. You can start from the end to the beginning, or from the beginning to the end, because I wanted to question the chronology, the linear chronology of Western historiography. I wanted to connect with the idea of circular chronology, which is contained in the structure of the book itself, in the semiotics of the book itself. So the form and the content espouse and dialogue with each other in the book. And then I wrote with the idea of heteroglossia. Even when writing in French, I brought into the picture French from Brittany, from regional France, from Normandy, Old French, the sailors' French, uh, Scandinavian language, Bhojpuri, Urdu, Persian language, Creole, English, and French. You see, this is the fragmented way of writing something, of retrieving the voiceless, which is, I think, intellectually and poetically an archipelagic way of writing between languages, between geographical spaces, because I was also thinking of the history of my father, that is in the Atlantic. So I could not write without this part of the history, and also referencing the history of my mother from the east of India. So you see, I had to write between many in betweens, and that was the particularity of writing the Coolitude poetology in the global South. And then at the time, of course, the postmodern discourse was very important, and the postcolonials as well. And I tried to go beyond the postmodern by addressing the issue of transmodern. This has been a constant element of my work, because the postmodern can be limited to a critique of modernity by people from the North, and not really addressing the reality of people from the global South. Whereas when you write through a transmodern dimension, you are also addressing your own reality, your own traditions, but without getting closed in your traditions. So this is the way I started writing, and this is a qualitative approach, which means I had to analyze discourse as comparatist. You know this is a major part of your work. We have to address hermeneutics, the way of decoding complex realities and encoding also complex realities. Because, okay, I could have written a kind of ontogenesis of indention, saying, okay, these people, the indentured persons, they suffer the most, here the history, and so on and so forth. So we have to think of that. That was just writing in a limited way for me. I wanted to connect with other meanings of what historiography means. I mean, the history of history, the writing of history, and also in the process of encoding this paradigm of Coolitude, questioning in a kind of more colonial, more post-colonial way, questioning my own encoding as well. So I engage with heuristics, discoveries, with a kind of new anamnesis, how you can make new discoveries with historic paradigms. And this means that my approach was interdisciplinary from the outset, holistic, with a particular set of methods, rules, postulates. And this offered me a theoretical perspective for understanding which set of methods of best practices I could adopt. And in a way, I was speaking about the praxis. I started capitalizing my experience of indenture. I've been doing that for 31 years. This cargo hall of stars enabled me, at the invitation of Dr. Marina Carter, who is a very famous historian of Indian migration in indenture, to write in a theoretical manner, more analytical manner, in the first anthology of Coolitude, published by Anthem University Press. You can also have it on the internet at Cambridge University Press. It has become an ebook as well at CUP. And we applied, of course, an empirical approach. knowledge that could be obtained through direct and very verifiable observations. And we also connected this transdisciplinary approach with epistemology, which is very important for us, and also I think for researchers, for writers in the field, because I think knowledge can be obtained through a theory of knowledge and of knowing. I'm quoting Paul Ricoeur, a French theorist here. There is a genealogy of knowledge. When we address ideas, there is a history of ideas, and we have to reference our ideas, and the emerging field of indenture, and you as comparatists, I think you are very important in carrying out this work of in an ethical manner. We have to reference the writing that has come before us, that is being done now, and continue building on that and referencing. This is I think the basic epistemological approach I have had for 31 years. It is an hermeneutic approach. It is, I think, a congruence between philosophy, methodology, the relation between epistemology, which is interpretation, basically, and ontology. When I speak about the ontology, I do not want to restrict a complex discourse to the science of being, because ontology is the science of being. But I want to broaden it to the humanities in an intersubjectivity of knowledge. Sorry for being a bit theoretical, but we are between comparatists. I think you understand that our approach implies a kind of retrieval of a new subjecthood, because the indentured person in the past had a specific differential type of subjecthood. When the coolie trade, this is a scientific term for indentureship as well, was started, the indentured person was considered as a second zone citizen. He had a differential way of traveling. Even when he signed a contract, he was not absolutely free. He was monitored, social mobility was monitored, geographic mobility was monitored, but we can come to this later. In the theoretical part of what I'm talking is, I believe all these elements, inclusive indenture, in its own encoding, means we have to address philosophy, we have to address linguistics, semiology, the humanities, social sciences, history, anthropology, ethnology, all these elements that allow us to develop a transdisciplinary approach. This is what we pioneered some 31 years ago, that as nothing existed in the field at that time, it was interesting to enter the realm of ideas, and from the perspective of the subaltern. I know subalternity is a very important paradigm in India, because it questioned the way the intellectual elite of India addressed the way independence was achieved in India. But now what I'm trying to do, I'm writing something about this, is to get this intellectual elite, and you are the vanguard of this elite, of this intelligence, of the researchers, that we have to address indenture in a complex manner, and link this with the subaltern paradigm as well, because the indentured person was a subaltern. In the way you can define subaltern, someone who is a bit outside what was defined as imperial or colonial humanity and full subjecthood at that time, without even speaking of citizenship. So this is the first part of what is inclusiveness is indentureship. The second part is what is inclusiveness when we are having a praxis, I mean, putting the ideas in practice. Um, First, I addressed diversity. We cannot have an interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary practice approach without developing new avenues of relationship between paradigms, histories, narratives. So I addressed diversity within indentureship itself. That is, we have the tendency, when we read some definitions of indentureship, even nowadays, that it is a kind of very restricted area for one particular ethnic group. And it goes against scientific reading of indentureship. We must document what we are saying. I mean, if we just define what history is in a solipsist manner, solipsism means I want a word to mean what I want to mean. I mean, this is a fantasy. We are doing Humpty Dumpty history. That is, we are not referencing documents. We are not addressing, even if we are having a transdisciplinary approach, we keep a scientific approach and we document what we are saying. So I said, no, within indenture itself, we have to develop an approach intra-indenture of diversity. That is, there were many groups from different parts of India, from China also, because indentureship did not entail only people from India. You had people from China, you had people from India, of course, from Southeast Asia, from France, from Madeira, from Madagascar, from Europe, from Normandy. And so it is a global page of history. So do not make it a small part of our own history. Of course, each and every part of this history has its specificities, but these have a congruence. They all connect to a larger page of the humanities, to a page of global history. What is the idea of connecting with the diversity intra-indenture, inside the indenture itself? It is that we developed the idea of addressing diversities extra-indenture. I mean, when you have an approach that when you were traveling, even when you were in the depot, you were traveling from a village, you were in the depot near the Hooghly River in Calcutta, you were waiting for the coolie ship to come, and you were on board of the ship, something happened on the ship, and even at the depot, everything was reshuffled. You come to the Ghat in Mauritius or other depots in the world, and then you go to the sugar plantation, railway lines, or heavy rubber plantations elsewhere in the world. You have new mental and social cultural setups that have developed. You don't travel with India as a bulk which is not challenged in the process of the voyage. I mean, even nowadays when you travel, who is the person who travels? Who is the person who started traveling? Who is the person who arrives? I mean, I experiment this idea each and every time, especially when you're traveling on board of a ship. You have time to think and to envisage what is happening to you, what you're leaving beyond. And this, in the book, I told you about Cargo Hold of the Stars. I divide the centrality of the oceanic voyage in the paradigm of Coolitude. Why? Because on board of the ship, you see a different cosmogony. You see different stars, even the different cosmology. This is part of the Indian heritage or Chinese heritage, because these two peoples are great astrologers. They can connect with the stars. They learn about the names of new stars, maybe later, or the show another type of sky. they learned about a different language on board of the ship, because these ship were crew, manned by different people speaking different languages, a new technology on board. But more important, they had to live together, coming from different areas, different castes, different languages, different religions. And this is where I devised the only humanism existing in the global south and springing from indentureship. It is the humanism of diversity. I explore the paradigm of Kalapani, which is the taboo of the sea, which is a contextualized taboo, meaning it has different definitions in history and different parts of India and different religions as well. But okay, basically, I use this idea poetologically to say that when you travel on the sea, there's a dissolution of your prior ontologies, your prior being, and you engage in your human relationship. This is what the people develop on board of the ship, the Jahaji Bahan or Jahaji Bai bond, brotherhood and sisterhood of the boat, which I metaphorized as the humanism of diversity, saying that now we have started to be to develop in a creative way, because most of the time we show the indentured persons as helpless people who have no imagination. They can't react to situations. We have to change this gaze. These people were also creative. And I can tell you, I witnessed that these were enduring bonds. When I was in Mauritius, collaborating with the GATT and so on, I heard these stories about, my grandfather was a Jahaji Bai of this other person. The one was a Muslim, the other was a Hindu, And so this is not just a figment of the imagination. So from this humanism of diversity intra-indenture, I devised the word the Indias, the creolized India, which means I connected this with a misnomer of Christopher Columbus. When he was going to India, he was not going to America. Nobody knew there was a new continent. Maybe some people from Africa, the Malians, say they went there before Christopher Columbus, the Vikings probably, and maybe the Irish probably, because of the near, America. So, but okay, let's say historically, this was referenced as a major discovery by Christopher Columbus, that he bumped into something he called the India, the Indies. This is why we reference the Western Indies nowadays, or the Western Indias. In Spanish, they speak about Las Indias, what they call the Americas. Even now, the archives of West Indies, they call this Casa de las Indias. You see, the word is still here. So the idea of connecting with this discovery of Columbus, or misnomer of Columbus, is India for me is where you go to. It is what India have you imagined, and which India do you connect with? Because India is a mosaic India, it's Corallian India. It has its roots, but it is open to diversities and to currents. This is the idea of pan-indenturism as well, because one part of the indenture that happened in Southeast Asia, in the Mascarene Islands, Mauritius, Réunion, Madagascar, South Africa, and so on, has to connect with the pan-indentured experiences in the Atlantic, for instance, and even in the Pacific. We have done this connection as well. And it has to connect with other servitudes also there. This is also the humanism of diversity, how we interact with other cultures, with other narratives of servitudes. And this is why I speak about a global paradigm, a global South paradigm that allows us in our own making, in our own psyche of the subaltern, to envisage a new relation to the humanities through a trans-archipelagic, trans-oceanic approach, through a pan-indentured approach. So this is inclusiveness for me through the relationship between indenture and the other humanities in servitude. And more specifically, we devised the first methodology between slavery and indenture. We started that in 1989. We wrote several articles. You will find elements in this second anthology, which is an ebook. In a conversation with Dr. Marina Carter, I speak about this. I participated in steering committees at the Apravasi Ghat to make the Ghat an inclusive space. With Dr. Satyendra Piyatam, historian of the Ghat, we thought of what was the percentage of people who arrived at the Apravasi Ghat, which is the emblematic site for indentureship in the world. It is a World Heritage Site classified by UNESCO. We read the figure 5% of people who were non-Indians who transited through the Apravasi Ghat to sugar plantations and beyond. So we have to open to the other humanities, because what makes us grow is when we connect to the other humanities. I keep saying that in this pandemic, if we just try to remain in our own nooks and corner and do not want to engage with broader humanities, we don't understand the real issue of the pandemic. We have to think ourselves as a human species, because we have only this planet at the moment. And we have this pandemic means it is a pandemic for everyone, rich or poor. Okay, maybe the rich get better treatment, the powerful get better treatment than the other people, but it's a global issue. And this means we have to address it globally. But this wisdom must come through the building of humanism, because we cannot close our borders. You see, when we close our borders, we are impacted in many ways. The DNA of the world, of India, means it has to exchange, it has to travel, it has to have migrants. You see, this is as old as the history of the world, and Coolitude is immersed in this reality. And of course, there are divisive politics, ideologies, but we question these because these are short-sighted visions. So this methodology of slavery and indenture, which was first devised through Coolitude, is also gaining traction. And I hope epistemologically people will reference the idea, because this idea grounded the international indentured labor route, which emerged in 2016, and the ex-ambassador of India at UNESCO, Baswati Mukherjee, helped me and the Apravasi Ghat and Dr. Dudu Jain, the former slave route director of UNESCO, to finalize the inscription of the International Indentured Labor Route project. And you will see, I referenced this in the second anthology of Coolitude, the ebook, in the preambles of UNESCO concerning this route. This is a global route. I mean, for you, it is very interesting as young researchers to explore this route. Take this route, it is your route. We have to work in it in an intercultural and even transcultural way. Because even in interculturalism, we can have a hierarchy. In transculturalism, it is a bigger flow of cultures on the egalitarian mode, you see. So we have this reference in this preamble of the indenture route, and also that it has to dialogue with the root of slavery. And this is one major contribution of Coolitude, and I hope you will learn about this. But I know you already must have learned about this. I can see how keen you are, very open to the outside world. Now, continuing of this idea of inclusiveness, the second element to consider is that these Indias means also that we have a mosaic India. I mentioned the idea of Corallian Indias. As a metaphor, the coral means that, okay, we wrote on sea, the Indian Ocean, the only ocean with the name of a nationality, which is very interesting. And we also wrote trying to see what is at the bottom of the ocean. We did not write with his feet, which were wet, you see. We tried to connect and interact with this. I'm speaking of the pandemic, and we have to think ourselves as a species. The central metaphor of the Coolitude discourse is the coral, which is rooted and open to currents, just as indenture, the paradigm, the philosophy of indenture, the DNA of indenture of India, of any country, it has its traditions, its roots, but each and every time we close on the root, we fossilize the root. This means we are nurturing ideas that can clash. And we don't need that right now. We need to build bigger humanities because we are having more and more common challenges. So the coral embodies that from the poor indentured person, the coolie, I give valence to the term coolie, which is a colonialist slur in many countries. I am not saying you must call an indentured person a coolie. This is offensive. I am just using a scientific word saying that coolie also means a daily wage earner. Who can question this reality? It is a sociological reality. This is also part of our holistic approach. It is a sociology of South Asia that this word coolie comes from. I did not invent it. If you want to explore indenture in the archives, the very first scientific word which will come up is, of course, in the Indian Ocean, is coolie trade. It's not any other word. Now, if you want to burn the archives or erase this, this is Humpty Dumpty history. I am a scientific person. My training is scientific, and I am speaking about scientific data. So it enables the indentured person, as David Dabedin underlined, it allows the voiceless, the subaltern, to enter the realm of ideas. By choosing the coral, it means we are now, as starting from indentureship, having a global symbol saying our history is rooted, our past is rooted, we don't want to erase this, but we have traveled, we have other visions of life. This has enriched us. This is, the history of most of the people on Earth. In 2020, we had 82 million people only as refugees. I'm not speaking about tourists. It could be 1 billion persons. Each time you travel, if you are not a regressive person, you are enriched in the process, you see. So the coral means, okay, we have our past, we have our traditions, our languages, but we are open to currents. You choose what you like, what you don't like. You can't like everything, but not interacting is a refusal to live, And so this coral became an ecological metaphor and a cultural diversity metaphor. This is also inclusiveness, because the coral is a seat of biodiversity. If there is no coral, the biodiversity disappears progressively in the sea. And I developed the link that if you love biodiversity, you must love cultural biodiversity. That would be schizophrenic approach. And I gave the scientific proof. For example, in the recent Amazon forest, it has been observed when people burn the forest for a monolithic culture or agriculture, these ashes make a deposit. They travel through the Amazon River, and there are coral archipelagos. This is also archipelagic writing. These corals ultimately are impacted. So when you are taking the land of the first people, the tribal people they are called, or the indigenous people, I call them our wise elders, because they embody the cultural diversity and the ecological diversity on the hills. I'm thinking of the the tribal peoples, the hill peoples. You know, the very first people who came to Mauritius as indentured are the Dangas, the hill people. You know, this is referenced in the archives. You can research and find this. They are also called the Arbuthnot Coolies. There were 36 people who came to Mauritius in 1834. They traveled during 6 weeks, and they were 30 women, 30 men, 6 women. They were on sugar plantations in Mauritius, and they had their names at the Apravasigat in Mauritius. So I'm not inventing anything. If now people want to burn the statues of coolies or destroy them, it is now an element of ignorance in history, and I will not condone this act. But I want just to state scientific facts, you see. So the idea of the coral means it is a way of thinking the Anthropocene from indentureship through a South global perspective. And this allows us to connect also with the history of endangered humanities and endangered species. Now, you might ask the question of how I articulated, how I constructed this methodology. I'm speaking of a praxis. You know, this year in France, we celebrated the 20th anniversary of the classification of slavery as a crime against humanity. And at the time, when the slave route emerged at UNESCO in 1994, I asked the Director General of UNESCO at the time to inscribe a route of the indentured person. But at the time, that was not possible because it has been very painful to make a slave route visible, because a lot of countries were very scared there would be a debate around compensation. So he told me, wait. So I waited until 1994, 2014, sorry, and we have this inscribed in 2016. But we had to devise a typology. And what is interesting for you is it is a comparative typology. The very first comparative typology between slavery and indenture was made in an article where I said we have, of course, to bring slavery to visibility so that people should know about this past, but we have to connect it with indentureship. Why? In most of the discourses of government nowadays, when they speak about slavery, they say, okay, slavery, okay, broadly speaking, was abolished in 1834, as if nothing happened afterwards. There was indentureship. Indentureship was a new device of the empire, of the colonies as well, to have cheap labor. These people who traveled on board the ship, it was a very risky enterprise at the time with a small salary. Okay, they had a contract, but it was very dangerous. Many died on the ship, as you know. There was malnutrition, dysentery, cholera, typhoid, and so on. So these people, they traveled on former slave ships converted to coolie ships. So I devised a comparative typology or typology between these two pages of servitude, stating, as early as 1989, that the slave did not travel with a contract. The legal document governing how slavery had to be conducted the status of the slave, the punishment to be meted out to the slave was the Black Code of Colbert. So, and the slave was defined as a piece of furniture that one could pass on to one's heirs as a heritage. But the novelty of indentureship is a contract was devised to make the abolitionists, especially, and also in the humanitarian discourse of the empire, that this is not a new form of slavery. I will come to the Tinkerian paradigm later, saying now these people have a contract. So I interpreted this contract as a scriptural inscription of the humanity of the indentured person or the coolie, because this is a legal document which virtually binds the employee and the employer, even the contract is not respected as we know. But this is a kind of novelty compared to slavery, because this gives a kind of subjecthood to the indentured person. The indentured person put this thumbprint, when most of them were not literate, or an X on the contract. And I was speaking about the Dangar, the Hilkuli contract. It was written in Bengali, And so these people sometimes did not understand, most of the time did not understand what was a contract. You see, in most of the rural parts of India, speaking of a contract to somebody, even in Bengali or his own language, or her own language, who would understand this really? It was a great experiment. That was the term used by the British Empire at the time, you see. So these people traveled with the contracts. So this gave them the habeas corpus, which is a protection, a legal, juridical protection. Habeas corpus means I have my body, from the Latin. I own my body. The slave did not own his or her body. It was he or she was an object defined as a piece of furniture. I'm quoting the Black Code of Colbert. So this is a major difference. Then I stated in this comparative typology, I'm going to dwell on this because we are speaking between comparatists, that the indentured trip was virtually a return trip. At the end of the contract, you were entitled to a free passage to come back. Sometimes, most of the times, I don't know, depending on the country, that was not respected, but at least that was inscribed. But slavery was a non-return trip, a single trip. This is very important when I'm speaking about phenomenological paradigms on the psyche of people traveling at the time. And this also entailed the space you are located on the ship you're traveling, which impacts your imagination, of course. What is the amount of space you're going to be allocated on board of the ship? Slaves were enchained most of the time in the hold. These indentured persons more or less free at particular times. Of course, there was brutality on board, there was rape and so on. You know this better than I. So this is another part of my comparative typology. And when these persons arrived in Mauritius, Trinidad, and elsewhere, Malaysia, they had to devise forms of resistance. Basically, I wrote in the 90s that the slave resorted to marooning, marronage in French, that is the runaway. And of course, the indentured persons had some kind of marronage, but the most specific signifier of this time, of this form of servitude, is vagrancy. They became vagrants. And vagrant depots were created in many parts of the world where there was indentureship, because when they move outside the depot, I was speaking about monitored physical mobility, you needed a pass with the identity number on your coolie contract reference, because if you did not have the authority authorization of the master of the plantation, you were considered as a vacant. You could be imprisoned, fined, and so on. So this is also another major difference between these two pages of servitude. Of course, when we speak about resistance in aesthetics, very important for you, I would say that the indentured person rode the land, the mati, the motherland, recreating the Indian village with the Baitka, the madrasa, reading the Bhagavad Gita, the Ramayana, the Quran, and or their sacred books. So they could come with books. In a major difference also with the slave, they were naked migrants, and the indentured persons were semi-naked migrants because they traveled with books, or they copied books. I have seen extraordinarily moving documents in Mauritius where Ramayana was written by hand, or the Quran written by hand, because these people, there were also people who were literate. There were also literate people among slaves, because I've seen online a Quran written by a slave in the America, in the United States. But most of them, of course, they could not come with books. The indentured persons also come with grains. They had a small reservoir of grains or plants, which they could. This also explains partly where they could have crop culture, to survive and develop crop gardening later. When they allotted some land, that was also part of the deal. Where you were indentured but not always respected. So, but the ex-slave, they resorted to the invention of language like Creole language, for example, which was enriched, of course, by the indenture, because words of Bhojpuri and in Hindi and so on were injected in Creole. And the ex-slave, they also wrote poetry, they wrote literature. And my generation in Mauritius is among the first generation to address literature and move from the utilitarian use of language on plantation or sugar plantation or mines or guano pits to our inscription, aesthetic inscription in history, which means when we write about literature, we are moving beyond our immediate past and inscribing ourselves in the larger discourse of humanities. This is also a major paradigm of indenture and the comparative typology with the slavery. There are other typologies, of course, but I'm giving you the main elements. How many minutes are left now?
Sir, you can continue, sir. Not an issue.
Pardon?
I said you can continue.
Okay. So nowadays, I would like to address specifically your generation. I know that in India, for some time, indentureship has been a bit out of focus. I know there are some historians and people from transdisciplinary fields interested in this paradigm now, because it enables us, the way we developed it in inclusive indenture, it allows you to go to any discourse regarding culture, identity, complexity in the world. It can be cultural, political, sociological, ethnological, anthropological, through literature studies. And this comes from the paradigm of indentureship. From the point of view of history, I think India must connect with this page of its history. Because it's a page of your history. It is a page which is modified because there was a voyage. We have a lot of kinship with India. We have been developing inclusiveness for 3 decades now. And I believe that your generation is going to do a very important piece of work in opening the mainland, the hinterland, the intellectual mainland to this part of your history in a trans-oceanic, trans-archipelagic way. Because if inclusive indenture has been devised, it is through this history. I mean, the Indian Ocean should not separate us. It should connect us. The Atlantic as well should not separate us, neither the Pacific and beyond, because it is a page of global history which is yours. I mean, you can use this paradigm to access all the humanities, the social sciences, and history. And why? Because when you are comparatist, you are not in binary thought. You are in a thought of diversity, in what Edgar Morin, the French thinker, calls the thought of complexity. And we are in a complex world. I'm not saying we have to obliterate specificities. They are important. But specificities should not close us on small, what Amin Malouf called mortal identities. When you connect with Indenture, you connect with broader humanities. It is your history. And then, I mean, in our own daily practice, intellectual thoughts, approaches, we will not be feeling as a foreigner when we read anyone. Through these two global paradigms of servitude, slavery, when I'm speaking about inclusiveness, I'm referencing the book of Neera Wickramasinghe. She just wrote a wonderful book called A Slave in a Palanquin. And this book says that we have to use overlapping categorizations, intertwining of paradigms. Because she speaks about Indian slaves who came to Sri Lanka. When I wrote this typology between slavery and indenture, I say we have to stop ethnicizing servitude. The very first slave in Mauritius was an Indian. Then came the indentured person. The very first slave to Réunion Island, you know, this French island which is near Mauritius, was an Indian boy. There were Indian and Malay slaves in South Africa. There were slaves before indentured persons who were Indians. And among the indentured persons, there were Chinese, there were Africans, there were Europeans. You see what I mean? Compartmentalization of disciplines can prevent you from seeing the broader picture, because addressing things globally, and the destiny of everybody of us is global, gives us an intellectual approach, a human approach as well, that will not always limit us to referencing ideas that have been, let's say, elaborated in the global north. I'm not saying that the global north has not interesting ideas. These people also have their survival in the north. We must see things in a complex manner. We can see how, for example, the fate of the indentured persons and the working class and the slaughter of the Industrial Revolution were linked, and how elements developed to monitor the indentured persons or coolies were used to monitor the working classes in Europe. So we must be very careful when we address things. Now this means that it gives you an entry point to global history, and I'm going back to this my starting point from your poetics of location, from the genealogy of your geography, from the history. I was speaking about episteme, about epistemology, through an archaeology of knowledge, which you have to retrieve. And this work has been done for 30 years in Coolitude, and I believe your generation can still work, open up to this. For example, study poetry, study literature from Mauritius, from Réunion, from South Africa, from the Caribbean. There was a thesis written by Véronique Gapaga. She's a university researcher from Belgium, bringing together the writing of women from the Atlantic and the Indian Ocean through the construction of Coolitude that was done 15 years ago. In the Southeast Asia, you have a thesis, a remarkable thesis written by Shivani Gurunathan from Malaysia. She analyzed, this is very comparative, literature from Mauritius, the Caribbean, and Southeast Asia through the paradigm of Coolitude. This means no ocean, no continent is close to you as from now on, if ever this was the case. But I think now it is time for us to exchange. Thank you for having listened to me. I had 1 hour. I hope I have not gone beyond.
Thank you, Dr. Torabully. It was amazing listening to you. Just hope this will go on, but we have obviously some time limitations and some academic platform. And thank you for this very amazing lecture. Purbash was saying something? Okay. So, thank you very much for this session, and we'll move to the Q&A session now. We have some wonderful comments from the audience in YouTube. We'll first take them. Shall we proceed, sir?
Yeah. Well, while waiting for the questions, I would say now that this third anthology, which is on the way,
Yes.
we are collaborating with Marina Carter again and Dr. Crispin Bates.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yes. Oh,
It's
Crispin Bates,
amazing.
we have been collaborating for at least
Wow.
5-6 years. And there is something which is, we can talk about this later, but something is going out at Cambridge University Press next year.
Sir, yeah.
And of course,
Yes, sir, please continue. Yeah.
we are going to keep contact and develop what we are having here. But also one thing I would like to tell you that we are going to have an international festival of Coolitude with the Amina Ghafour Institute of Indenture. We had the first one in 2018 in Guadeloupe. I am saying hello to my good friend Michel Narayan Semi in Guadeloupe, who helped us to bring together the very first international event in history between indenture and slavery. And we spoke about the necessity to develop this new discipline, slavery and indenture. And our guest of honor was Dr. Doudou Dieng from Senegal, who was the ex-slave route director. And of course, we had very interesting interaction with the artists, because Coolitude is all these intellectual disciplines, but very interesting work we are doing right now with artists, poets. We have Chandra Mohan, who is a poet from the Dalit people. They reference with Coolitude because we are addressing the same idea of the voiceless, the subaltern within India. And outside India, this is also a comparative avenue to chart how the Coolitude literature can be connected with the other subaltern literatures here. We had a wonderful lecture with Dr. Ottmar Ette, a foremost intellectual from Germany, who wrote about trans-archipelagic. You can find this article in the second anthology in English. How
Yeah.
Coolitude works through the Corallian metaphor and gives a broader idea of a neglected part of indenture, identity of the Indians or the Chinese, whoever, and gives it a modern, a transmodern element, which is extremely modern because we are articulating, this is the art of articulation, imaginaries, the sciences, with creative also elements. You know, we are not in the idolatry of the past. We are not having the love of the antiquarian for the past. We love the history written by historians. These facts are very important. I am very, I would say, grateful to their work because they spend hours and hours. I also say hello to my good friend Ashutosh Kumar, who wrote The Coolies of the Empire. Very
An
important.
amazing book.
Yeah,
Amazing
very
book.
accurate. He references Coolitude in his book as well, because it allowed to go beyond this derogatory use of the word by the colonists and the racists in South Africa. You know, when somebody treats you, whatever, Dalit or slave or coolie, you say, so what? Who are you to define my identity? You know, when somebody insulted Aimé Césaire, the greatest poet of French language in the 20th century, he said, so what? The nigger tells you, I respect everybody here, to buzz off. And he wrote the most wonderful pages of poetry, world poetry, you see. So I say, I refuse the definition. This is a challenge. Some people have not understood this because they don't have complex thought or they are on a bad agenda, you know, because they want to impose in the agenda. They want to see the history as antedante. When I address the word coolie, I say, go beyond the word. I am not saying use the word as an insult. People don't understand complexity, you see. I say go beyond the word. I never use the word coolie to insult. Can you believe this? Some people are still stuck in their own prejudice or ignorance. I don't know how this happens, but this is part of history. But most of the people understand that we deconstructed the word, but they don't know what is deconstruction. When you are comparatist, you know what it is. You take a word that has been encoded, you say, this has been said in a context, but when I go to the archives, they speak about coolie trade. They not speak about any other trade. So I have to use the word. I mean, everybody who is sensible would do this. I never invented the word. And when I'm referencing this, so, this word is insulting us. This is so, well, I'm going to stop here regarding this. I deconstruct the word. Please go open the dictionary if you don't understand. Some people open what is the meaning of deconstruction. We are in a call of post-structuralists, post-structuralists, deconstruction and recuperation of a term using the stone, the thought they were throwing at us, to hit back with it and say, who are you to call me a coolie? You are nothing. I continue to do the word within my own definition, and I have brought ideas in the word you wanted to offend me with. This is the intellectual contraction we have to give to these people, you know? So, and if you're still sensitive to this term, this means we are still not growing up in our history and the way people treat us. I mean, if you say, okay, so what? You know what people telling you every day? Oh, curly hair. Every day tells you curly hair. So if you feel offended, you are the weaker element. So I have beautiful curly hair. So what is your problem? You see, I mean, it is your own
Yeah.
prejudice. So why should I define myself through your looking grid, which is very poor, racist, and prejudiced? I don't care about you. And I'm going to use the word again because it is a scientific word. I did not invent it. I accept in my inclusive approach any word, but which is documented. Please document what you say. And as you intellectuals in the field, document what you say, and nobody can attack you. You will go on for centuries. Go and
Thank you.
document. This is we do. Well, I tell these people because I know somebody sent you something, Aratrika, on the page of Facebook. I did not want to waste time with this, but just to deconstruct this word. Coolitude is deconstruction. Please reference the word properly. And this is why this is 31 years is still gaining traction.
Thank you, sir. And I am a student and both a research scholar and a teacher of comparative literature. And I'm also working on indenture servitude, mostly focusing within the subcontinent, the tea gardens and coal mines. And uh, can you comment on how this was very similar, like from the many texts I have read, what how was happening within South Asia and the whole coolie network, sending the indentured laborers to various countries were very similar. The forms of exploitation are very similar. So, like from your experiences or stories, maybe or narratives you heard from your own mother, can you comment on that? That how was that? If she knew, or and she also came from Calcutta, and Calcutta was like the multilingual, multicultural space from where the coolies were sent to also to Ashram tea gardens and to the Bihar coal mines or to the various foreign countries like Mauritius, Fiji. So it's such an interesting place, this Calcutta.
Yes, you see, this is why I tried in my earlier elements, words, to connect with Calcutta.
Yes,
It is an emblematic place for indentureship. You younger generation, please be aware of what you are having here. Because this Hooghly River, which I've never seen, is on my mind, you know. And how these people were in the depots, it's on my mind. I wish to visit these places, which is part of my history. So
yes,
it's memorial connection. It is, you know, when I wrote about articulating these two UNESCO sites in Mauritius, the
yeah, I can show them.
Abrabasigat and the Le Monde Heritage Site, which is an innovative approach because at the time nobody had the idea of connecting two sites of UNESCO through slavery and indentureship. I thought of these liquid elements of the river leading to the Indian Ocean, and these people who were enslaved who traveled on the liquid element as well. And as you know, you have ghats in Bengal, in Calcutta, and elsewhere. And a ghat is a place near a liquid space, no?
Yeah,
Basically, you see. And the Le Monde site in Mauritius is a
yeah,
hill
it's a beautiful
going
picture.
on the Indian Ocean. I mean, through this liquid space, we can connect. I mean, when you come from the mainland, sometimes you are in a terracentric approach. And when I wrote Coolitude, I wrote about a telusographic approach and
Yes,
oceanic.
hallucinographic.
I think this idea must come forward in our perception of what we're going to address. And Calcutta is, for me, the theater, uh, the theater where I would say the Oedipian uh, indentureship is started. Because you have the recruiters coming here. Among them, the first were the Arbuthnot and Villanders, you know, recruited. The recruiters who brought the first batches of Dangars to
Yeah,
Mauritius, these
Dhandas, yeah.
you know. 30, 30. You know, their names are referenced in a monument in Mauritius. So we pay homage to these people coming from this place. And if you explore coolie literature, indentureship literature, Calcutta comes very often. The great experiment, the other name of indentureship, comes with Calcutta always here. So you people, you're sitting on a gold mine. You're sitting on a gold mine. Try to have a develop further transdisciplinary
Yeah, when
approach.
I want to explore if there are like if
Yes.
people indentured laborers, if there's some state back in Calcutta, if there are like traces of them. I've heard about that, but I don't have any evidence. So
Yes, yes, of course, there were returnees and, of course, very unfortunate elements at the time because I was speaking about this Kalapani taboo or the sound that when they crossed the sea in some, let's say, parts of the Indian population that was considered as pollution, so they had to make
yeah,
new
yeah, yeah,
rituals
yeah,
and
yeah.
so on and so forth. But uh, we try to say the oceanic approach is not only a taboo. People were daring enough to go there. They kept elements of their past. They negotiated other elements as well. And one example of this is I exchange once and twice with Amitav Ghosh. If you take the Ibis trilogy of Ghosh, it is Coolitude for me. And this Bay of Bengal and Calcutta, is the novel of Coolitude. At this time,
Yeah.
the moment I'm speaking to you, I can't find a better novel of Coolitude than what has been written by Master Amitav Ghosh. Because you have
This
you
trilogy.
were speaking about prolingual Calcutta and so on and so many things were experimented there, you see, as
Yeah.
a maritime city, no? It's very important, no? And cosmopolitan, no? Whichever definition you give to cosmopolitan, it can be limited at times. But let's say it was a cosmopolitan, the way it opens to diversities. And what happens in the Ibis trilogy of Ghosh? The ship, you have the
Yeah.
centrality of the voyage. It is the place where you have heteroglossia, different types of languages and registers of language, patois, creoles
Yeah.
on board, Uh, different, it's a cross section of indentureship. Lascar sailors, people
Last
making
class. Yeah.
catalogs of
Yeah.
plants. It's amazing. I was speaking of plants. The botany of Coolitude is fantastic. The food of Coolitude, Creole food, even in India. I was speaking about, we have in Mauritius different types of food like vindai, vindaloo, vindai, which is Goan, but also a mix of Portuguese, Indian, and so on. You know that vinegar was brought to India by the Portuguese.
Yeah. Yeah. Many things. Yeah.
Indian food. It is opening from this idea of diversity, any element of diversity that interacts with the Indias. It can be the Portuguese India, the British India, the whichever India, whichever part of India, it is diversity. So you have all these elements of languages, heteroglossia, botany, and Chinese coolies on board in
Yeah.
India,
Chinese
Indian
school is
coolies,
also yes.
And when I read the book, I wrote to Amita Ghosh, and I said, wow. But he read Coolitude because he exchanged also with Dr. Marina Carter on this issue. Uh, and he said that helped him to go beyond, the strict categorization, because at the time, indenture was indenture, and maybe you had to write also only from the coolie from Bhubaneswar, for example, and not from the one coming from Goa or Pondicherry or whichever place of India, you see. So this idea of pan-indenturism and diversity means there is no limit to you, as long as you have a methodology. This is what I've been developing. You have a grid, an intellectual approach. You can go to Master Ghosh. You can go to anyone writing in India about voyage, diversity, go to the archives. There is no textual limit. And also, as comparatists, I wrote my thesis on intertextuality in the poetry of T.S. Eliot. Intertextuality is central in our writing. If you compare, you don't have intertextuality, I mean, you don't have comparative literature, you see. And then I've now, with my age, I've reached the element of autotextuality because I'm sometimes obliged to quote myself. There's a body of work, and it is ongoing. And this is also epistemology. You have to reference that had been written, build on this, and you, the young generation, reference and develop your own perceptions, constructions of this. And I mean, as people in the academic field, we have to be ethical in our approach. Each and every time we take an idea, we must reference because this makes us more alert intellectually. This
Yes.
enriches our text, you see. So I'm saying this because some people on internet nowadays, they just paste and copy, you see. But this is not academia for me. Academia is a painstaking effort. You take time. You take time to analyze.
We
You
know
take
that.
reference. Oh yes, yes. I've been trained this way. This is when I came to Lyon, I had very good semiologists. And that was we have when we are learning, we have to have good people transmitting the ethics of knowledge. This is fundamental. And this is how our activities and occupations is something we like because there is an element of, okay, we are made with the writing of each other. We have to be humble in this way and reference, Each and every time I take quotation from another person, I put it here because I'm happy I've read this person. He or she has brought something to me. So this will not diminish my work, please.
No, and also you said how because in schools, like still today, indentured labor, the whole period, the whole movement, the whole migration, still added in the school textbook. But like when I was in school in the central board, but we didn't have from the school level, from the higher secondary level, the secondary level, we do not read much about indentured laborers, although we read about slavery. So this is something you have pointed out correctly. We should, I mean, India should be more inclusive of it because we are all related, like the
I,
colors with a mosaic, as you said.
yeah. Well, I think your generation is good to do this work because I think we have to address the issue of textbooks. We have to address the issue for the younger generations, even I would
Yeah,
say secondary school, and some elements at primary level.
yes,
Because with this international indentured labor route, this is acknowledged as a part of global history.
yeah,
You see what I mean? This means we have to move our grids, our categorizations, and inspire our governors, our rulers, our politicians, our governing bodies of our academic institutes to have a more open approach of indenture because I can't see an approach of indenture which is regressive, which is closed, which is okay, I want this, I don't want this. I mean, things are complex. When you are doing comparative literature, you enter the psyche of people. You even go the unconscious of the people, you see. And there is an element of unconscious also we address when you are addressing indentureship. What has been said, what has not been said. And you can see that in the silences, half-said words. And this is an important process as well. Historians can't say everything. History is incomplete without interpretation. and interpretation come from people who have a disciplinary approach. You see, you can read a historic text and then you can enrich the text. You see, of course, there are very interesting economic, sociological, ethnological elements in some history books, but most of the history books, they keep to a limit, speaking about the past, without, saying we have to live in a kind of form of presentism. We have to make history present. It is the past of the present or the present of the past. For example, the policy of memorial sites in Mauritius, by linking the Apravasi Ghat and the Le Monde heritage site, I said these memories must not compete with each other. Before Coolitude, memories and histories competed with each other. Oh, I suffered more than you. A slave suffered more than he. I say, look here, you suffered, I suffered. Okay, but so what? Grow together? And I always quote André Malraux, the former French culture minister, who said, what is the use of my suffering if it does not empower me, if it does not enable me to grow with the suffering into the suffering of the other? History is not a kind of, selfish reading to oppress somebody. It is to learn and bring what we can bring together, because we have so many problems. Why do we have to add, even through, between commas, intellectual constructions, to bring hate and violence to this world? We don't need this. I mean, when I speak about humanism of diversity through inclusive indenture, it means, okay, guys, ladies, okay, this has been an unpalatable truth. Different. We have been flogged, we have been raped. This is a colonial truth, imperial truth. But what do we make of it now? This is important. How can we document this history? It is important to document. And then how we interpret this history and how we live with it. If this makes you less human, then you have missed something in the approach. If this makes you somebody who is more at ease with differences, with yourself, I mean, if you are not at ease with yourself after having conducted this work, then the work must continue. It takes time. It takes time to come to a level of, let's say, humanism and wisdom, because ultimately what you make of knowledge is wisdom. Knowledge is an accumulation of facts, but wisdom is what you make of knowledge. So there is also an element of how you interpret these elements, you see. So this is basically why, at the moment, I am happy to work with you and exchange with you, because I am at the same level of awareness and intellectual curiosity, because it can never stop.
Yes.
It can never stop.
It can never stop. Well, we have some questions from YouTube, and the first question is from FH. Hi, Khal. I think you have also touched upon this point, but anyway, you just used the poetics of the Kalapani. I wonder how does it account for other indentured laborers, for example, the Muslims of India and the Chinese indentured laborers?
That's a very interesting question. Very good question. That's why I'm speaking about complex history and the complexity within indenture itself. That is, we have to question monolithic constructions, even of the Kalapani. I brought this element first in the Cargo Hold of the Stars because I wrote on the Kalapani. But of course, in different religious groups, different caste groups, different geographically situated groups, the perception is different. If I take the example of Kalapani taboo itself in Indian history, it was eased at different periods of history. It was strengthened at different periods of history. For example, when the British wanted to have the external commerce of India, they brought this idea of Kalapani more. They wanted to be the middleman, you see. And sometimes even the Brahmanic people eased this taboo because some people had to travel.
Yes.
At different times, you had different definitions of the Kalapani taboo. Then why not make also a possibility of using the sea voyage as an opportunity also to see something that is positive in it. Many people did that during indenture. If not, they would have not boarded the ship. What is taboo? We don't go there. You see what I mean? This is also a possibility probably to start over a new life. So it is complex. And I know this taboo, some Muslims spoke about this. This is interesting enough because this is interculturalism between Hindus and Muslims, you know, because sometimes they said, okay, oh, this is also something bad maybe for us. Maybe for the Tamils, for example, people from Tamil Nadu, South India, this is less reference, you know. So, okay, there is a taboo. Even Gandhi, as you know, when he went to study in London, when he came back, he had to perform some rituals of purification, you see. So it depends. It depends on situations, on peoples, on groups. And what I wanted to say is it is a space of, let's say, death, symbolic death, also physical death at times, spiritual loss, you know, of nirvana, the reincarnation cycle, and you know, because you're going to the palaces of the demons, of the Huglis, you see, for the Hindus, some Hindus. But at the same time, it is also from the blue sea that, you know, they say the throat of Krishna, no, if I'm not mistaken, the sea was born. So there is something also about the sacred element of the sea. And you know that Raman, this is very interesting from the Kalapani culture of some Indians. Raman is the only scientist in the world who explains scientifically about the blue color of the Mediterranean. You know this fact.
Wow.
Well, yeah, just scientific Raman, he spoke about, he explained. And I think he's one of the Nobel Prize. Why the sea spoke about the rays of light, how they travel. And it is the rays of light that gave the color of the sea, that gave the color of the sea. And coming from the Kalapani culture, this is something which means we can see also the blue sea. We can see the blue ocean. So this is not in contradiction with the imaginary of India. India is fantastic. India is a mosaic. India is inventive. And I'm giving you another example. So don't get stuck on things. See what you can make positive out of it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, the next question is from Mohammad Nazam Akbar. I have been looking at the civil records from 1913 and 1945 in Fiji. Most of the wedding couples have no surnames. Would there be a reason for the missing surnames of this subaltern group?
Well, this is also a very complex question, more for the historian. But I would say that the Fiji case also is a very specific case in indenture, because I think if there's a pain in indentureship that still lingers nowadays, it comes from Fiji. You know that some people refer to the contract there as Germitia or Germit, because
Agreement, yes.
they question the word agreement, saying that before agreement is a Sanskritic prefix, but I don't have confirmation of this hypothesis, which means non-contract. So they remove the word to make it Griment, which becomes Germit. It's a deformation of the word. But this does not change the reality of indentureship, which means contract remain a contract. And many people, while opposing the contract, I think were misled. And the absence of surname in the contract might be an indication that the contract was not conducted in what the officials, the British officials, would define as the modus operandi to convey the indentured persons to Fiji, for example. This is a very painful page of history. One thing I forgot to say, and thank you for this question, about the comparative typology between slavery and indenture is, when the slaves, they traveled on board of the ship, the people who were enslaved, because African people were not slaves by birth, they were enslaved.
Yeah.
Their names were confiscated, were changed, were robbed. And it is the master who gives them their names, on cotton fields and so on. And very, very strange names like Jerrycan or, Bell, or, because they were associated with objects. They had an objectal status, not a full subjective. The difference with indentureship is the indentured persons, their names were referenced on the contract. But sometimes their names were inverted. The first name became the surname and vice versa. Because some people, they did not even know their dates of birth, in these colonial times, in rural areas. Sometimes they were confused about the name, you see. Maybe they gave two first names, and for the official who was not, conversant with the Hindi language or Bhojpuri language, or Tamil language, he just said, okay, I have two names. This is the Christian name between commas. This is the surname, and he gave these names. This is a possible explanation. And another element for comparatists is very interesting. One, they jotted the name, the contract, or on these large registers on ships, or these registers handed over to the officials on arrival. Their names were misspelled, badly written. And I call this the symbolic wound to the indentured person. That is, even if you inscribed symbolically as a person through the signature, even with an X or with the thumbprint on the contract, even if your name has been written, your name has been wounded. This means your identity in indentureship has been wounded. This is a symbolic wound. I was speaking about psychoanalysis earlier. We also have to go into psychoanalysis. What this means nowadays, and I know this person, the Muhammad Najam Akbar, is pinpointing, to this fact that there is a kind of respect that was not a full respect, the full subjecthood of the indentured person, even in the official transcription of these documents, because as you know, these travels in the times of indentureship was initiated through a massive bureaucratic work, which we call coolie bureaucracy. And this bureaucracy referenced things saying, okay, I have the two names, you see, if your name is, for example, Muhammad Najam Akbar, Muhammad and Najam, and I say, okay, Najam is your surname. So this might be an explanation, but of course, I also say that the historians have their say on this.
I just want to add one thing here. This question reminded me actually one thing. I mean that during in America when slave are brought, they use one name for the slave particularly. whatever, if in case of the like the both leg Django or something, that the one name they even use. And when like they used to I mean get released from their recruiters, they given the title of like freeman, and they used the title freeman with their name. So in this case of like indentureship, which is like came into prominence like much later in 1830s. So when it's like these laborers are like using names and everything, uh, I was just curious if they like use these sort of surnames or anything which is like signifies they are free, they are not anymore like in this slave, I mean in this whole system or something. So I'm really curious. I mean, if this sort of like last name they use or not. So this is the thing actually. This pops up in my mind.
Well, we have to carry on more research about this. But when I reference the basic elements, um, when the coolie trade started, these imperial, let's say, officials, they were very prudent in the way that abolitionists earlier say we don't want a replica of slave trade. That is, okay, we have, 500 persons on board of a slave ship, whether they have a name or not, sometimes this is not important. We know from which village they came. This was most of the time reference. The port of embankment, and where they were sold to which masters, because it was a trade. And as trade, they were commodified, But even if, in a way, the indentured person were commodified, there was, when they came to South Africa, for example, children and women were referenced as lost stock. What is the meaning of stock? This is coolie trade as well. Even if the name changed, there is some commodification in that, And when somebody could not work much because they had to work, 12 hours a day, even on Saturday, they were called wastage. But wastage comes as a metonymy, a part for a war, from the bagasses, the molasses, the bagasses, which is a byproduct of the sugar cane. You said they were referenced as wastage. I mean, the broad discourse is, okay, what's in a name? What's in a name? I mean, not in the Shakespearean way. If, we can give this element of identification here, we give it because these people were not tourists or, free passengers, for example, who had a differential treatment in the migration scheme of the empire. And there was a hiatus between what the imperial authorities envisage as the global transportation system and the bureaucratic system of indentureship, and there were the colonials. They addressed the issue. For example, there were a lot of conflicts between Natal in South Africa, what we call nowadays South Africa. We call South Africa in the 1960s, before it was Natal or Transvaal. They had their own ways of segregating people, you see. And they differentiated between traders, the Persian traders, for example, even if they were Indians, these changeable categorizations. I mean, the whole setup, the mental setup, man, the way you reference a name is secondary, you see. Maybe for the merchant, because these people were more considered as subjects of Her Majesty, The name were written, they had a business, they bought, they sell, they were full subjects. But these people who were indentured, they were here just to work and go back home after 5 years. In some countries, some people, they use many devices to re-indenture them. So this is a complex issue we have to go further into. I don't have 100%, but I give the broader setup of how names were not fully respected. And, for example, in slavery, I know when people who were named, for example, Cotton, they wanted to have another name they had to ask permission, from the priest or the master to have a second name, a family name. So the issue of nomination goes to to a further element. I'm referencing Christopher Columbus again. When Christopher Columbus went to India, he was sailing to India and Katai, the ancient name of China, Chipango, Japan. He said, I want, let's say, 9% of what I will discover. This is the origin of copyright. You know this. This is the origin of copyright. So I discover, I get the money. And he had to finance part of his travel, this voyage. So he went to see bankers and so on. And then he said, okay, now we give you this part. But the most important element Columbus fought for was to have the title of Admiral of the obscure seas. This is another definition of the Kalapani on the Atlantic. They were called the dark seas, Oceania Obscura. And Columbus asked to be the person who will give the name of the places he will discover. This is extraordinary. The function of nomination in psychoanalysis, you know this. The symbolic function is extraordinary. This means only the master of the world can name the parts of the world, because this means I am including you in my dominant discourse. So the name of the indentured or the slave follows the same rationale. The nomination does not belong to you fully. Even when you have a contract, you have your body. You see what I mean? So what is important in the name is, when I call Aratrika, you look at me, because the signifier of your body resonates in the name I'm calling you. But when I call you, I don't know, an object, an axe, for example, to cut, I am reducing you to the labor function. And I'm also erasing all your genealogy of the past, your cosmogony, because a name references you to your history. You see? And you can see how this destroys the psyche of the subaltern who is enslaved or indentured. So you can't reference back to your cosmogony, to your genealogy. This means you will not be able to find strength in your past history to resist. You have to reinvent yourself. And this is why this humanism of diversity of indenture is so important, because you build new bonds of solidarity. This starts already in the depot, but mostly on the sea, because you see the dangers of the sea. When you see the elements of the sea, you are sailing on a ship, you are scared. If you have never seen the sea before, you say, what is happening to me? Oh, this man speaks, or this woman speaks the same language as me. We eat the same food. We are brothers and sisters. You see? So everything is tumbled over, So even at that time, maybe, okay, they write this name, we don't care. This is the utilitarian discourse, not really the humanitarian discourse. The humanitarian discourse comes when there's resistance through what they call the coolie agents, changed to protector of immigrants afterwards, you see, that because we have a contract, we can petition. This inscribes us in the broader category of the law, which the slave did not have. We have a text. As comparatists, you know this. There's comparative legal documents, comparative law. We can say, okay, this is the law, this is a practice, and we can at least petition, write to the local authorities. And if there's a coolie agent, we send this to London and they say, okay, there's an investigation, that after the first batches of coolies who went back to India, they denounced the conditions of work. Coolitude was stopped for some 10 years. I think in 1847, something like that. So you see, there was a kind of clash between the colonial and the imperial, because when you are in situ, you can, because before the news reach the center of the empire in London, it takes time, So you have a kind of maneuver you can indulge with it. I don't know if I
And
answered your
also,
question, Pritam.
yes. And also, like talking about names, we read in Totaram Sanadhya. He was a Indenture liberal himself. He wrote an autobiography. He was in Fiji, maybe Fiji Deep, maybe Ekish Verse. My 21 years in Fiji Islands. He also talks about he was a Brahmin, and the recruiters were very fussy about recruiting the Brahmins because the Brahmins would create chaos because of their caste and untouchability problems and stuff. So he changed his name to some Thakur. So this was also some things going on in the recruiting system itself.
Yes, but there's also one thing we have not mentioned is conversion. Even if many indentured people did not convert because they could have bring their religion, their sacred books, but there is also, for example, in many French islands where there was indenture, many people have a what do you call a Christian name, and some change also the family name. So this element also was there. And also social pressure. Sometimes you are in a small minority in order to adapt, to survive. You have to negotiate with other elements, change your name to
Yes,
your religion. It was difficult, It was not something very easy for these people.
that's true. And like we have the next, we do have two more questions from YouTube. The next question is from Arif. Arif is asking regarding the coolie term, is it not that the historical weight, the colonial of the term, outweighs the sense of the social reality of the term daily wage earners? A hegemonic association of the term with a kind of slavery, with a persistence of hierarchy.
Well, if you see the definition of coolie, it's a polysemic term. I mean, when you use it in a monosemic way, you have an agenda. As I was speaking about the sociological reality of India, South Asia, coolie is a Tamil word also meaning daily wage
Mm. Mm.
earner. What is offensive in this? And of course, as far as I can go, this was a normal, between commas, term used by the Portuguese that made it enter the
Yes,
vocabulary as a porter. I mean, if you travel everywhere in Thailand, in Malaysia, everywhere, you will see porters. These people were called porters. Somebody calls somebody a porter is it offensive? So if you mean that the colonial should outweigh the other definitions of, then as I'm saying you're a victim of the colonial definition. This means we are thrice or twice victimized again. Words have different definitions in different contexts. Why should the colonial always outweigh the other definitions? Can't we be free in our taxonomy, in our onomastics? Can't we be the masters or mistresses of our own vocabularies? Can't we say we mean what a word means also, but documented from what we are saying? You see, for example, I'm speaking about Gandhi again. We have to document things. Gandhi was also called an Indian in South Africa. An Indian. He's an Indian. You know what this means? Even in some parts of UK nowadays, are you Indian? It is the way you say it. Now, if you respond to, oh, Indian means nothing, then I change my nationality. I am Indian, so what? But if you insult me as a coolie, I tell you what the coolie is going to tell you. That you have a prejudice in your mind. And the word is even, used, reclaimed by many artists nowadays. So it is a false debate, this definition. And even many people in South Africa were called Samis. You know this. That was an offensive term. And you call somebody a Sami in South Africa, he or she knows what you mean. I mean, the colonist wanted to offend you, but this is a contextual definition of it. Now, if you accept the definition of the colonial, you don't deconstruct the term, you're saying, oh, this is not to be used. But who dictates you his or her terms? This is the question. The question is, go to the archives. Okay, it is written, but it was not a word invented by the British. At least it is a word, it comes from the Indian reality. You see?
Yeah.
It comes from the Chinese reality. Coolie means hard, bitter work. But it is reality. Many people do hard, bitter work nowadays. So by erasing the word, you mean you are erasing the reality? Come on. We have to be serious. When the Indian government changed the name coolie for porters, you know what these porters said? Give us better wages and better uniforms. We don't care about the word coolie. This is an intelligent response.
Yes, even when we shared this poster for this event, people were criticizing about why using the term coolie. And like, I spoke to people earlier, to scholars, and like in my lectures, people have been like, why use the term coolie? It's a colonial word, but maybe we can reclaim the sense of identity. And
But
coolie has a historical origin in India, the Tamil origin we have here, and also has a
yeah.
Gujarati origin, as I've read.
Yeah, but I mean, it has also other origins, even in Turkish, But then you have different definitions in different
Yeah.
lands, and it became offensive. If, let's say, if you were called, I don't know, Gujaratis, maybe, when you were indentured, this would have become an offensive term, probably. But then should we stop using the word Gujarati? Who dictates this? And when you know exactly it comes from those people who enslaved and indentured people to exploit them. If we accept a monosemic definition, you mean you are giving precedence to these people that they can accept this. We have to reference this is a colonialist slur, of course. I'm never questioning this term. I don't like it to be used as a colonialist slur, you see. But when you see the movement of blacks, Black Lives Matters nowadays, black was a defensive term that people reclaim, you see? And you see what definition you can bring to it. If you feel offended, okay, black, so what is the word you need to use? Okay, Afro-American means Afro-American. You see, there are elements which speak to different contexts. So please, we are not offending anyone. This is a debate which is only seeing oneself through a small, narrow-minded grid. History has been written before us. I have not invented the term. If it was something else, trade, I would have called it by its name. Let us call it spade a spade. I am not telling you, call everybody a coolie. No. I am referencing something historically. If you say, you type the word archives, you go and look for Indenture and you type word coolies, you will find the historic documents referencing the coolie. So we were dominated people in these times. So why didn't we accept the term Indians at that time? Because we were dominated people. Come on, let us be realistic. So by using it, and Coolitude goes beyond the term.
Yes.
It is chewed. Why do you miss this word chewed? Even in this construction and deconstruction, we still hear, you see how people have been enchained mentally just to hear coolie. So why do you You don't go beyond what the concept encompasses. It gives all these elements I've described earlier. So, okay, I know it is offensive for somebody. Some people still use it offensively, but it is the opportunity to say, okay, look here, I can also use it, so I am not defined by you. It is, we have to become adults, I think, the process. Now we are still offended by the word that goes beyond it, then something is, we must question ourselves, not the word. Huh?
That's great. And the last question is from Shreya Katyani. Please comment on the new forms of slavery prevalent today, like the kafala system of GCC, situation of illegal migrants, refugees, asylum seekers, and haven't we learned anything from the indentured experience? And I was going to
Unfortunately,
ask same question.
unfortunately, we have not learned so much. And this is a main issue.
Thank you, Shreya, for
This
it.
is why we want to go beyond these strict definitions that make us waste time and energy. This makes us go beyond elements that are of importance. And this is intended to be so. Once Gandhi was called a lawyer in Mauritius, in South Africa, he was offended. You know why? Mostly because he did not want to associate himself with the indentured persons. He was not basically interested in the indentured status itself, how these people were suffering. Eventually, he came to be interested with these people. You see, our own prejudice. We are speaking of the prejudice of the others. Let us address our own prejudice. I love Gandhi. Huh? I keep defending Gandhi when people want to unbolt his statue. He made mistakes in the early Gandhi. You know this. Nelson Mandela spoke about this.
Yeah.
Gandhi made mistakes. He was a racist. He had his stereotypes. You know, he rejected some Indians because he was not. He was a dandy. You know that. He thought he was a full citizen of the empire until somebody said, "You coolie." But he did not deconstruct the word. He felt offended because this is the sad part of Gandhi. He was an intellectual. He knew the value of word. He knew as a lawyer, how to break, this word on the head of the offender. But he did not know because he was caught in his own limited categorization at the time. He said, I am an equal of the British. He had this fantasy that all citizens of the empire are equal, but not in South Africa. Not in South. This coolie word changed Gandhi, made him a human being. Why should not this coolie word change us nowadays? It's offensive, we go away. But please see that new Coolitude is going on. New indentureship in the kafala system and elsewhere. When somebody is taken on a contract in any part of the world, and one thing is, when you sign a contract nowadays, we sign a contract nowadays for labor. We are the descendants of the coolies. Please don't feel ashamed. You don't know your history when you're saying this. Because they experimented the word contract on an international level. This is world history. So should you be ashamed of those people who suffered to become indentured persons? Come on, wake up, please. Be proud of them. And you know that many labor laws that protects the employees nowadays, made by the International Labor Organization in the 1920s, they were from the indentured experience. So would you say now, I don't want coolies? Come on. So yes, we are descendants of coolies. If you are proud of these people, and stop being ashamed of these people, they made sacrifices. If you have another agenda, you have to come forward and say why. Why you are ashamed of being a coolie, or reference to a coolie, which is a historic term. When you are not, this is not used as an insult, why you feel insulted? You must question, bring the real picture into focus. This I never hear about this. You see, these people hide themselves between their finger, behind their finger. They don't say the exact social, but I know they can't come. They can't come in the open and talk about this. They have a lot of prejudice within their own kin, their own folks. There is exploitation ongoing in many parts of the world. And this is the basic issue. When I speak about Coolitude, I say this history is ongoing. Anybody can become nowadays a coolie. You call it a cyber coolie, whatever coolie. And why is
Yes,
this term
cyberbullying.
replicated nowadays if it has no valence? Cyber coolie. Did I invent this term? Oh, come on. Come on, wake up and read. Read what is happening around you. And don't hide yourself between your finger, behind your finger. You know, the coolie is a more complex reality. What is more important is how you deconstruct it. If you don't want to deconstruct it, go on with your prejudice. It is your prejudice, it's not mine. So, but if you want to deconstruct it, come with facts and arguments, document, and then we discuss. But just come with a word, with a word, with a word. So what? What do you add in the debate? Can you move beyond? Can you open to the other realities? The other realities are, with this pandemic, I am telling you, I wrote even a book on this in French. It is part of one of the articles I wrote, that we are now in the new indentureship period. Because the economic crisis makes it easier for the employers to renegotiate the contract and pay you less. And you, young people, you are endangered. You make a lot of sacrifices to have a degree. And they will tell you, well, there's no money, there's no, and you will see many labor laws are being changed. I can see that. They will make you work more hours for less pay. This is the basic issue, but this with the contract. Because they can't enslave you, put chains in you. It is a way of replicating coolie trade again now. And just wait for the pandemic, after the post-pandemic, I hope it will come back, it will stop, but you will just see the economic crisis this will create, you see. And exploitation has never stopped, because the way we think, we don't go to bigger solidarities. You see, there is a saying which says a finger is pointing to the moon, but people like to see the finger. They don't want to see the moon, you see. I don't know why, but this is their own problem. This is not my problem. I mean, we have been thinking for 30 years not to, be in an obsessional, way of looking history and ideas and move around our own obsessions when there are bigger problems around. And I think within our own countries, I take the example of Mauritius. There are people who are exploited with a contract. Don't go far. Now, if you want to open your eyes and be realistic, see the truth, you will see. If you want to keep in a kind of cognitive dissonance, you can do it. But the issue is we have to be very vigilant. Very difficult days are here and ahead. And the labor is the main paradigm. Don't be mistaken. It's not race, religion, or anything else. It has people who are going to exploit us. This is the problem.
Yes.
But knowing
And
this, the history of indenture helps a lot, because many elements are coming back.
yes, and it kind of scary to think that there is indentureship going on around us, and we don't know how we are indentured in various forms, even in this neo-colonial society. So it's very scary to think of.
I mean, it's a broader paradigm of exploitation. This is what we must address, but we must do it through new solidarities. and I don't want to see people trying to restrict the focus of something which is global. You believe that these people who are exploiting you are not global? They don't have a global vision? You have the ethnic vision, but not them. They have you have the colonial vision, but not them. They are here to rip you, to rip you off. And the COVID is not making things better. I tell you, you'll see that. Huh? So going through indentureship allows you to understand between slavery and indentureship how things have changed and how things can continue to impact on our lives. Betty Govindan, how are you? I was speaking about South Africa. Thank you, Betty Govindan. You're doing great work as well there.
We have several comments, and the last one we'll take from Arif. He's saying that it's a continuation of his last question. We have the privilege of knowledge to understand that the term, I mean, he's talking about the term coolie, needs to be reclaimed. But what about the hegemonic ideology that is floating in the society among the people who doesn't have the privilege of academia?
And then we have to do the kind of work we're doing. We speak about the school, for example, early education. We speak about artists, about music, about food. I mean, food is an extraordinary medium to make people aware that through traveling, through labor migrations, we have a lot of exchanges. You see, we don't have to go to academia all the time. Academia is one of the media, you know. When you're eating something, you say, oh, this, for example, dalpuri in Bengal or dalpuri in Mauritius, how these things have changed. Why don't we make it the same way? So the privilege of academia gives you additional tool to deconstruct the hegemonic ideology. This has been ongoing for centuries. If you look, I was speaking about the working class before. These people knew they were exploited. So they did not wait for indenture to know they were indentured, they were exploited. They could feel it in an ontological way that they are working hard, not getting the money. This is also another medium to say, this is a hegemonic ideology. They want to divide you but rule you. This is through work. Work is a medium which is fantastic. Everybody knows that you can be exploited through work. And indentureship is a paradigm which tells you, well, people have been indentured abroad. And in India itself, you had coolies in India, in tea plantations. Don't go so far. The story has not stopped. So this exploitation has been going on. And hegemonic discourse, if you are an honest person, academic or not, you question the hegemonic discourse because, the happy few manipulate this discourse. If you're happy with the hegemonic discourse, you may be one of them. But I mean, as people who think, and people, I don't know if you have to be an academic to know if you are exploited or not. People are intelligent enough outside academia to know that they are exploited or not. I mean, I talk with people with different occupations, I don't stay, in my own circles of intellectuals. I see all types of people, and we know what is going on. But if you go on social media, you will know this, that they get less money for the same work now. And I think they know that there are ways of tampering with the contracts nowadays, because the contract is still central in labor. And the great experiment was based on that. This is the great experiment, using the contract for transnational labor. But this doesn't mean that it did not impact on national labor or regional labor. So this is a complex paradigm to explore. But I see that more and more people are understanding this, going beyond the binary, because as long as we are in the binary setup, us versus they, exploitation will go on. This is the hegemonic thought, no? Us versus they. Then they can divide and rule. I mean, now, the future, and the past. It is the same rule, huh?
Also, we have several comments, but it's almost 2.5 hours. So 2.5 hours, so we have to go towards concluding the session. And before that, I'd like to show our participants and viewers the books written, the English books, Dr. Khal Torabully. You can buy them. They're really amazing. This is the first part. Dr. Torabully, this came out in 2002, right?
That's right, that's right.
Yes.
Co-authored with Dr. Marina Carter.
Yeah, co-author. And the second book, this Coolitude 2, 31 Years of Science, this has come out this year.
Yeah, I sent you the link, no?
Yes, sir, yes,
On
sir.
Kindle.
Is it visible? Pratim, is it visible, the link?
It's an e-book.
No, the
I will keep the price lower for you, because
Yeah. I'll just keep
this
in
is a
touch with you.
concrete
This is
example
great.
of Coolitude. I know the economic problems of the young people nowadays. So I think I will make the price go lower, so that people can have it for $2-3 maximum. Just wait, I will
Thank you
send
so
you.
much, Dr. Torabully. Thank you. To be really helpful for us.
Thank you,
And
thank you.
this has come out 19 years after the first book. So what are the changes, the main changes, or has your approach changed towards the book, or what are the main
Oh,
changes in both the books?
oh yes, in the second anthology, we have contributors from many different fields. We have a fantastic article by Dr. Sachendra Piatam, who is from the Apravasi Ghat. We have from a cultural theorist comparative literature as well, Dr. Françoise Lyonnais, who speaks about the work of Amitav Ghosh and my own work. We have Renluka Maharaj, who colorized the photographs of coolie bells. You see, the term exists in postcard. And a very interesting way she describes paintings, extraordinary paintings by Raouf Oderat. She will make the next cover picture of the second anthology. If you can show the link of the second anthology, it is interesting. And the second French anthology, we have another painting by Raouf Oderat. We have articles by Hakka Chinese historians showing the inclusiveness of indentureship in Chinese history. We have an article by Neera Wickramasinghe. Oh my God, I don't have the whole list. People will excuse me.
Yeah.
But I have an interview.
Yeah, the list of contributors are written here. Yeah, people can
Yeah, I
take a
have an
look at
interview
this one. Yeah.
with Marina Carter as well, where I chart the 31 years of inclusive writing through Coolitude about the memorialization of sites in Mauritius, the methodology of its slavery in Indenture. That was not in the first anthology, because in the first anthology, in fact, we referenced writers who had passed away as well, petitions and letters from the indentured area, connecting it with an aesthetics and literature. So it was not properly an anthology, but we referenced the word coolie to give the voice to the voiceless. And this is the very first theorization work of indentured history
Wow.
that enabled indenture to move into the category of an autonomous discipline. This is very important to say. And the second anthology goes further, references people. We have also Cristina Bastos, who speaks about work exploitation in the Portuguese world, for example. I have poems from other people. I have from Chandra Mohan, a Dalit poet, as well. So we have some other writers. Sorry, I don't remember their names. May I be excused? But it
Yeah,
is
sure. The
interesting.
list of contributors are given here in the link I'm showing to the
Very,
participants
very,
now.
very interesting way. They, I mean, I think it is a kind of autotextuality of Coolitude now, because these people start quoting what has been said. Of course, there is this beautiful article by Otmar Ette, who is a German theorist. So now the third book will be out in at Cambridge University Press next year with co-editor Crispin Bates and Marina Carter.
Wow. And also, well, congratulations, Dr. Torabully. It's an amazing thing
Thank
you're
you.
doing.
Thank
And
you
it
very
also
much.
talks about the second book also talks about the International Indenture Labor Route project that you started. So also lots of congratulations for that. And also the book that came out I think last year, Cargo Hold of Stars, that I'm reading currently. It's an amazing book. People should get a look at it. It's a very nice book.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you, sir. Yes,
Well, just to tell you, keep going.
thank you.
It was a sheer pleasure to to share these ideas with you, and I know um, the elements of complexity that you toy with in your work are elements that are very important to address in nature. And
Yes,
starting from the Calcutta, which is a resonant place for indentureship, um, you have the vibration of the memory there, no? Of
yes.
history. And please keep going. And I want to read from your work because this
My
also
pleasure.
enables us to think in the widest scope. And I
Thank
would like
you.
really to know how you address these issues and and collaborate as well. Collaborate because
That is like a dream come true. Yes.
yeah, I would like very much this idea of having the younger people. I mean, as worthy as it you want, huh? But okay,
Thank
to have their say, on this issue. Thank you very much, and
Thank you very
thank
much.
you, my
Yes.
friend Venkata as well, who has been here. And I hope the
We
pandemic
had a
situation
wonderful
will.
session. We learned a lot from you. Yes.
Thank you, thank you. I also learned a lot from your question because these questions that have been asked are important questions because when you pioneer a field, it takes time. There are some people sometimes who have not been able to take time to understand all the complexity, and I feel that your work will also be very important to make this go across because anything that is complex in a world where we go very fast in a complex takes time to be understood. But this is the issue we have to address. We we don't think that everything can be understood in one session or in 1 year. But this is what keeps me going because the more I have this type of interrogation, the more I discover things. You see, and I know, but that is beautiful as a researcher that I have not learned, I have not explored 1/100th of this of this paradigm. You see, so we need you. We need your intellectual false insight, human approach as well, human way of
Yes.
seeing things, to bring things further. You're the future. You're the generation. I forgot to say, in our next French anthology, there's a beautiful article by Dr. Nalini Mohabir.
Okay.
Very, very interesting work she's doing. So,
Okay.
younger generation as well. The future is here. So that makes me happy. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you so much. And Professor, we'll just wait for seconds. We'll conclude the session and end the broadcast. Just
Thank you.
for a minute. Pratim, you will deliver the vote of thanks for concluding the
Yes,
official session.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So on behalf of the team Calcutta Comparatists 1919, let's just take 2 full minutes. A big thank you to Dr. Khal Torabully for joining us today, and it is like a real pleasure for us to learn from him, since like he's been researching for years on this indentured labor, Coolitude, and the methodology he proposed today, which is like comparative in nature, it's very unique and so on.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
this is a whole lot learning experience for us, and I think it will help the participants in their own and to learning. So a big thank you to Professor to express a sincere gratitude to you, and good night to participants. Stay with us, join on in our future lectures, and this is it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, sir.
All my love to the comparatists here. We are of the same tribe. Take good care. Stay safe until we
Yes, sir.
meet.
You too.